Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we talked about naming atoms, and now we're going to talk about determining the charge of an atom. So, for this, we're going to be looking at the types of charges that the different particles of atoms have, and how they affect what the actual charge of the atom itself is. So, previously, I've mentioned that the three different subatomic particles that make up our atoms have different charges. Protons have a positive charge, neutrons have a neutral charge, electrons have a negative charge. Protons, P positive, neutrons neutral, and the electrons, they are the negative charge. So, based on how many of these things that atoms have, it actually affects what the actual charge of that atom is. So, an easy way to understand this is just simply you compare your number of protons to your number of electrons, and this will tell you if your charge is either positive or it is negative. If you have more protons, because you have more positive charges, your charge is positive. If you have more electrons, then that means you have more negative charges, which means your overall charge is negative. So the way this ends up working out is that one positive charge is the exact opposite of one negative charge. Meaning, if you have 1 and 1, they will cancel out. That's how it ends up working. So the idea is, since one positive and one negative cancel each other out, whichever you have more of, since they can't cancel everyone out, the leftovers will be what the charge is. So if you have 5 negative charges and 3 positive charges, then what happens is 3 of the negative charges cancel out with the positives, but then you have 2 negative charges left over, meaning your overall charge is negative. This works the other way as well. If I have 4 positive charges and only 2 negative charges, well, 2 of the positives will cancel out with 2 of the negatives, while the remaining 2 positive charges will be there. So, here's a couple examples here. So, let's take a look at these. Example 1. I'm actually going to change my color real quick. And blue. Okay, so if an atom has 5 protons and 7 electrons, is the charge positive or negative? Well, let's take a look. We have 5 protons and 7 electrons. Easy way to look at this. What do we have more of? Is 7 more than 5? Yes. It means we have more electrons, which means we have more negative charges. So the overall charge of this one will be negative. If an atom has 10 protons and 8 electrons, is the charge positive or is it negative? Once again, electrons are negative charges, protons are positive charges. So, which do we have more of? The protons, which are 10, or the electrons, which are 8? 10 is more than 8. We have more protons, we have more positive charges. This one will have a positive charge. And then lastly, if an atom has 10 protons and 10 electrons, is the charge positive or negative? Well, hate to break it to you, but we have 10 and 10. Those are equal. That means this one is a trick question. So what ends up happening is we have a neutral charge. Neutral charges, we typically write them as a 0 charge. It has the charges neutral. All the positives and all the negatives will balance each other out. So now last slide. Ions. So when we talk about atoms that have a charge, the correct name for these things is an ion. So an ion is an atom with a charge. So if it is neutral, it is not an ion. But if it is positive or negative, it is in fact an ion because now it has a charge. When we talk about ions, ions actually have 2 different names. These names are the specific type of ion they are. There is a cation and an anion. Cations are positively charged ions. Anions are negatively charged ions. So one thing that I actually typically look at to help me remember which is the fact that the word cation has a T in it. You see this T? Well, positive charge things, we use a plus sign to represent positive. Plus sign looks like a T. So that's a little thing that I typically use to remember. Cations are positive because they have a T in it. Anions are negative charges. Now, because we know this, let's actually flip back. Boom. Let's look at these three atoms that we talked about. Atom 1, we said it has a negative charge. So because atom 1 has a negative charge, we will refer to this, let's see if I can write this, as an ion. That actually came out way better than it should have. Atom 2, because it has a positive charge, we will then refer to it as a, that's more what I was expecting, as a cation. Number 3, it is neither. This is just an atom. It is just an atom. Nothing special about it. It's not an ion. This is just a normal atom. So, I hope that makes sense. It's pretty quick and easy stuff. Technically speaking, you can give numbers to these charges, but I'm not stressing you guys out about that right now. I simply want you to be able to recognize if it's positive or negative. Is it a cation or an anion? So, that being said, I'm going to give you guys some questions. These questions will be pretty straightforward. Determine if it's positive or negative. Determine if it's a cation or anion. And just a couple questions that have to do with all this stuff. Have a good day. Have a good night. And remember to hit submit on your work.